But let's turn attention to the conversation today. President Bola Tinubu has unveiled an ambitious economic agenda with a targeted growth rate of 3.76% for the year 2024. Well, this announcement comes hand in hand with the presentation of an appropriation bill totaling a staggering 27.5 trillion naira, signaling a clear intent to bolster Nigeria's economic resilience and pave the way for sustained development. However, the budget also faces challenges including high debt service cost and the need to balance the impact of double-digit inflation to achieve targeted growth. But how easy a walk is this target? Well, that's the biggest question of the day. Let's get talking right away. I'm joined by the CEO Finance with Mukhtar, Mr. Mukhtar Mohammed. He joins me virtually now. Thank you, Mr. Mukhtar, for joining us. We appreciate you for joining us again. Yeah, let's begin this way. President Tinubu is targeting about 3.76% economic growth in the 2024 fiscal year, above the forecast by the World Bank and IMF put together. If you look at the IMF and World Bank, they are looking about 2.9% and 3%. So this is quite ambitious, according to many. How would you describe this?
Thank you, Frank, for having me. You said the word ambitious, very, very ambitious, and there's no crime in being ambitious. And I think the president is so ambitious with his first budget presentation to the National Assembly and to Nigeria in general. This budget is so ambitious, like you've pointed out again, the GDP growth. Even if the world is looking at a lower GDP, Africa is looking at a lower GDP, World Bank looking at a lower GDP. Even this, just moments ago, African Development Bank has even brought down the GDP of African countries. So then you know that it's very ambitious. But again, I think it's not that it's not achievable, but it will take a lot of restructuring. It will take a lot of microeconomic stability. It will take a lot of both physical and monetary policy to even do to 3%, because currently now GDP is very low. So President Tinubu is almost targeting almost 100%, more than 100% turn in the GDP. So that's why a lot of us say it's a very ambitious budget.
And like you've rightly inferred, the set target is not where the work is. The work is in the real workings of this target, isn't it? But let's look at what will be required to drive this growth for 2024. What area of priorities do you see opportunities to drive this growth?
I think the president have even highlighted this area of opportunities. I mean, he looks at drive this opportunity, look at security, look at critical infrastructure. So the critical infrastructure, I'm waiting from the briefing from the Honorable Minister of Budget and Planning to tell us really what these critical infrastructures are. Because President Tinubu has come with a new slogan, critical infrastructure. So we need to know how critical, because Nigeria is about in need of critical infrastructure in every area of this country. So definitely let's hear what those critical infrastructure are. But if you ask me, what are the critical infrastructure Nigeria needs? We need power, we need transportation, and then we need healthcare. And the President Tinubu talked about capacity building, and he talked about education, and that's where the student loan came in. I think no government have seen the human capital in Nigeria as it means to build capacity. I think he's the first that is looking at that critically and saying, look, how can we build capacity? It's not just by giving the budget to the education ministry. Also, we need to help. We need to begin to give loans to students so that they can be able to finish, and then we have that capacity building as a going process. Because the challenge is, if you open up your economy, you allow a lot of people come in, and you don't have the capacity to take advantage of it, then you leave your economy in the hands of foreign investors, and that does not augur well for any economy, because when there is a shaking, foreign investors want to leave your country immediately because they have no stake in it. So when you build capacity for your people, your people will begin to take opportunities of those investments that the foreign investors are trying to relinquish and go back to their country. That's what is happening in the oil sector. A lot of foreign companies are selling their asset to Nigerian companies, which is good. So for me, that is one area he has done well. So if you ask me, I've just said security. Security is ongoing. I'm excited that President Tinubu was so optimistic. 1.7 8 million barrels per day. I mean, that is, we know where we're coming from, about 900,000 at a point. We could not even do 1 million barrels. Now he's saying 1.78, and that also have improved our revenue status. I think for me, that shows that the security in terms of oil theft is being dealt with and being brought down to the minimum level. Then again, he talked about rejigging the entirety of the Nigerian security network. And in this, he's not talking just about the hardware. I mean, I think it's going to involve a lot of risk strategy in terms of human capital. The hardwares will still be there, like the weaponry, they will still be there. But I think more or less it's talking about human capital, making the morals of our soldiers high to be able to confront the common enemy that this nation have. Because it's by those things that someone will be able to say, look, I'm ready to lay down my life for my nation. I think those are an comprehensive package that President Tinubu is working towards for the military. And for education, he have set it up, student loan. But again, I have my challenge when it comes to student loan. We need to draw out who are these people that are entitled to this loan. And we need to go back a little, because he said it must be an household that will be able to earn about 500,000 naira in a year. And if you look at that the minimum wage, that means a lot of vulnerable Nigerians might not be partaker of this student loan. So we may need to look at it, and we should work with the high institutions to see this a good idea come to fruit.
Well, yes, of course, this is ambitious, has been described by many, including you. I mean, yes, of course, some people will say this is not enough for an economy with a population of 200 million people. Yes, of course, this is also has been lauded. It's the highest in the history of Nigeria's budgetary system. So, but let's talk about the concerns, therefore. The budget faces a lot of concern, and one is the cost of debt, right? The debt service cost and the need to balance the impact of double-digit inflation. How do you see the government addressing these concerns and creating a balance between growth and debt management?
Well, some people will say debt growth is coming to debt, so it depends on the type of growth you want to build. It's like if you're in a company, you want to expand, you might be looking for more facilities, you'll be looking for more debt, and then so that you can expand and grow your revenue, then pay off the debt. So that one is at one hand. So definitely debt in itself it's not so much of a bad, but what we've seen bad thing. What we've seen is that the previous administration have gone neck in deep into debt and leaving the incoming administration with no other options than to pay up this debt and also not be able to collect more debt. And even if President Tinubu is applying for most of this debt, his own administration might not even pay up this debt, because this debt are like the $7.8 billion is a debt that will start paying in 22 years from now. So at that time, President Tinubu had left. So and the interest is about 2.5%, which for me is very good. Now, when you look at currently, Frank, before President Tinubu came to power, our debt to budget is about almost 80% that we pay. At the point we're paying almost 92% on debt servicing. That's why the administration of the President Buhari had to go cap in hand to get to borrow more money. But now, with what we have now, I think 45% is not too bad, because again, if you say, oh, both for recurrent expenditure and capital expenditure, we have just 55%. But from where we are coming from to where we are now, I don't think it's a bad issue. Now, in dealing with inflation, the president has made it clear that he would tackle the core challenges that have brought up inflation, cost of doing business. He said he would tackle that. So we're waiting for the Minister of Budget and Planning to tell us how they are going to tackle that. He said that he would tackle the macroeconomic instability so that we can have inflationary pressure come down. For me, again, that is a very ambitious plan to see inflation come down to 21.4% from a high of almost 30%. I think a lot of things need to be sorted at both the monetary side and the physical side, especially the monetary side, because we are dealing with a monster, and we are dealing with a liquidity challenge that should be able to address this monster called inflation. So on the physical side, they have also had to look at how we can begin to grow what we eat or bring forward policy that would stimulate the productive sector of the Nigerian economy. Because as it stands now, the productive sector of the Nigerian economy is more or less dead. So I think that is what he should be looking into.
Hello, Mr. Mukhtar. Can you hear me? Are you there?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you talked about inflation target, of course, which the president did say that the inflation target for 2024 will be around 21%, just a little bit above 21%. And perhaps the reason why the president is setting, that target is because of his various interventions and in recent times, some of the reforms we've seen since he took over the reins of power. Don't you think that it's adding up and you think it's not significant enough to bring down inflation from a high of 27% last month to 21% in 2024?
Frank, you must know that inflation based on even KPMG, World Bank, inflation is going to hit almost 30% before the end of the year. And if you go by what the CBN governor said, he said for the next two, even before without the NPC meeting, they are going to hike rate. And so that also will bring cost of funding high, and that will also have an impact in inflation. So, like I said, the only way he could bring down this inflation, it's very ambitious, because the only way you have to bring down those inflation is to make sure that we look at the cost of doing business in Nigeria, the cost of business, because we are talking about a sector that, an economy that is driven power. Power is almost non-existent. Most of these highly manufacturing companies will have to sort for their own power plant, their own stuff. So definitely that does not also help. That does not help in bringing down these inflationary challenges that we are going to have. And then when you look at how the interventions, most of these interventions are not intervention that you will begin to see the results immediately. These are interventions that result will come, but definitely not immediate results that we'll begin to see, because those interventions have to do with data, have to do with getting the right, getting the processes right, the structure right, and who are these people that you're intervening, because you can't be throwing money at a problem and think that will bring the solution. So those key interventions, I said, they will look at the agricultural sector. For me, the critical sector of intervention has to be in this area of infrastructure. And once you get the infrastructure right, you get power right, you get transportation right, you get security right, then we begin to have cheap food from the northeast, because then with security, the farmers will be able to go to their farms, then bring those goods to Lagos. With good transport network, those goods will not encounter any challenges of cars broken down, then fixing it. All those things add to the inflation, the cost of living, and in turn add to inflation. So, and again, he has done what he ought to do in the terms of minimum wage for the Nigerian workers. But again, they still say that is not enough. And so how much can you beat inflation? How much can you create macroeconomic stability? Okay. It's in the area of job creation. And he has said that he's going to deal with that too.
All right. Let's quickly look at a few issues before I let you go. Let's talk about the role of the state and local government. We understand that the state gets allocations from the federal government. So where does the state and local government come in this, drive? 3.76%. The state, have to have a kind of role to play in this target, isn't it?
Definitely. Frank, the challenge we have in Nigeria is that we concentrate more on the federal. Nobody tends to look at the state government, and that has really made them to do a lot of things. If you look, since President Tinubu came to power, the states and local government have received more funding because there's no more the issue of subsidy payment. I think when he came to power sometime in June, they received the highest funding ever, about 1 trillion, was shared by the 3 tiers of government. So they have a bigger role to play, even in that, because they are the ones that are closer to the people, especially the local government. When President Tinubu is talking about infrastructure, I think we look at infrastructure right from when you leave your house, and that means you're dealing with the local government. You go to the main street, you're dealing with the state government. You go to the federal highway, you're dealing with the federal government. So in this, we need to see improvement of that, especially with the kind of revenue they are getting from the federation account. And also, they are also almost all states are improving their internal generated revenue. So the state have a larger role to play. And that's why the president, remember, he said he's going to set up a critical infrastructure, like a board that will make sure deal with critical area of infrastructural development, whether state, whether local government, whether federal. But he has to work hand in hand with them. I think there's a deduction that is planning for every federal allocation that will be key into key infrastructure on each state, and they will identify this infrastructure, and then they'll begin to deal, which I think is a fantastic thing he's trying to do. But like you know, sometimes because of politics, it could be a major challenge. But the states and the local government have a higher role to play to make sure that the president target in the area of GDP is met, because the people are closer to the local government and to the state government than they are to the federal government.
Okay, just before I allow you to go, I want us to talk about the outlook for 2023 and 2024, the first quarter of 2024. Yes, with regards to the economic growth target of the federal government, which states that it's planning to achieve about 3.76% in the 2024 fiscal year. So let's have your outlook. Yes, we do know in the second half, the economy grew like by 2.31%. The second half, it grew up and reviewed up by 2.51%, even though we had, it is below the previous year. If you compare it, what we have in 2022, about 3%. So talk to us about the outlook for, can Nigeria hit this target in 2024?
I think it's possible, but we need to put in the structure, and we need to put in the work, and we need to think out of the box. Let me tell you about this budget. Some things I like about this budget that makes it positive. Exchange rate, 750, which I think that's the right exchange rate for the naira to the dollar. Reduction in terms of reduction in the deficit of the budget from a budget of 11 trillion deficit to 9 trillion. That is huge. We're talking about 3 trillion. That is very huge. Oil production of also moved from almost from 900,000 to about 1.76 million barrels per day. That is huge. You can imagine widening the tax bracket, and he said the tax bracket is not going to come with taxing the already taxed, but he said widening the tax bracket with tax reform for smaller businesses and for even bigger businesses. This is what we've been clamoring for. Also, you need to look at the borrowing. Most of the borrowing will not be done. External borrowing is low, to about 33%, and the internal local borrowing is about 60-something%. And what that means is that we might begin to attract foreign direct investors and portfolio investors because of our fixed income market. We give you higher yield. So when you look at all this on papers, like I said, Frank, wonderful proposal, wonderful budget. But the problem with Nigeria has always been in implementation. And when there is an external shock, because whether you like it or not, our main source of revenue, where we are sure we have revenue, still remain the oil sector. Because the other sectors, what they bring to us is not commensurate to what we grew our GDP. So definitely we must guide that sector jealously to be able to achieve all this. So I think it is achievable first quarter. I think for me, what I'm looking for to first quarter is the stability of the exchange rate to that 750. For me, that would be a huge achievement. That would drive down inflation. Maybe that's why the president thinks he will bring inflation down to 21.4%, because if you look at about 80% of what we consume is imported into this country. And so when you look at the exchange rate, that means the cost of some of this between us. So if you're able to bring that exchange rate to 750 uniformly, both the parallel and the official market, then you have succeeded in bringing down inflation, like what happened in Kenya. So I think the president is looking at that, and that's why maybe he's optimistic. So for me, first quarter, what do I want us to deal with, both the physical and the monetary side? Think of how you can create stability in the exchange rate. When you do that, you bring down inflation, and that will improve our trade with other nations, that will attract liquidity into the economy, that will also create job opportunity for Nigerians. And once you start that in in an economy like as large as ours that is consumer driven, once the consumer knows that they have funds in their hand, then they will be able to galvanize the economy. Then you have a snowball effect in every area of the economy. And then with that, inflation will naturally take its place, will be in a downward trend.
All right. Well, sir, thank you so much for your time, Mr. Mukhtar Mohammed, CEO Finance Week with Mukhtar. Thank you so much for joining us on Business Nigeria.
Thank you for having me, Frank.